Hey, if you're like me, you're always trying to improve your home theater system, just to a certain degree, little tweaks here and there. You've already run Odyssey or Direct Live, and maybe you just want a little bit more. Sometimes people go to REW. It is a free download, but you do have to get a calibration mic to hook up to your laptop as well. But there's one big flaw with REW. It does not support height channels. It only supports ear level channels. So what do? Well, before you'd have to do some pretty crazy tricks or workarounds to try and get audio coming out of your height channels. So you could do some frequency sweeps or whatever just to try and get some audio coming out of them to maybe know which frequencies to EQ, etc. But now, my friends, no trickery is needed. We've got this. The Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit, brought to you by Technodad and Joe and Tell. What is it? How does it work? And is it worth it? Let's dive into it. All right, so right off the bat, before I even put in the disc whatsoever, I went into my IOTA AVX17 preamp and I put it back to the default. I put it back to the factory settings. I wanted to start from scratch. Because that's honestly what I recommend if you do end up using this calibration disc is totally start from scratch. Do this first. Don't have any EQ set, don't have any impulse responses done, don't have any time alignments done, etc. Just use this disc as if you've done nothing to calibrate your home theater system whatsoever. Because am I saying that this is going to replace Odyssey or replace Direct Live or replace REW? No, this is a perfect companion piece to those things. This is going to be working hand in hand with those other forms of room correction just to put your home theater system to that next level, right? Because what's really cool about this is that it is manual. If you're the type of person that wants to tweak things yourself, you want to make sure you are spacing your speakers to their optimal positions. You want to use your own ears to calibrate as opposed to just letting Odyssey do its thing and saying, all right, it's calibrated, now let's watch a movie. Because if you're like me, most of the time when you run Odyssey, you have to go back and manually change some things anyway. So that's why I like to start with this calibration disc first, then move on to room correction, then also introduce REW just to make it like this trifecta, you know? So I just wanted to get that out of the way first. Also, just FYI, this is not a tutorial on how to go through and do all these things. I mean, I will be showing you what each category is and just kind of explain what it does. But Technodad himself has been gracious enough to start rolling out some tutorials to give you a more in-depth overview on how to actually implement these tools into your home theater system. So be on the lookout for those from Technodad himself. But this is just going to be an overview of my impressions on this calibration toolkit. So it's not a tutorial. I just want to get that out of the way just so you're not confused. Yeah. So let's review it. All right, moving on to the disc itself. The intro is really cool because it just explains what it is going to be doing, and also that you need to set the level of your AVR to a comfortable position.
Welcome to the Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit. This track is here for you to set up your volume.
But one other thing I forgot to mention is that you probably want to put some earplugs in, honestly. Not because all the sounds are going to be coming out at extremely high volumes. No, I'm just saying there's a lot to this disc. So if you're constantly hearing pink noise, moving speakers ever so slightly, moving your ear probably pretty close to a tweeter if you're moving the speakers manually. Because after a while with all this pink noise and all these testing things and just being pounded and pounded with all these noises and sounds, it's going to be fatiguing after a while. So just a fair warning. So in the intro, it does have pink noise at a very low volume and just gets louder and louder and louder and louder until it says on the screen, as you can see here, it says max volume. So if it's at max volume and it's too loud, then yeah, turn down your AVR. But if it's too quiet, turn it up. You just want to get it in that just right position. This is really cool, but it's really simple. All it is Chana, aka Technodad, calling out the specific speakers that the sounds should be coming from. Just to double check, make sure you have everything wired correctly. And in fact, what he is calling out is coming out of the proper speaker. So really cool.
Front left. Center. Front right.
Level matching is just pretty much matching your levels, making sure that from your listening position, all the levels of your speakers are equal. Pretty simple. You could use an app like dB Meter Pro, like I use sometimes. I just put it on a tripod, put it in my listening position, had the microphone facing up, and then made sure that the sounds coming from the disc were all matching. Now it's up to you if you want them matching 60 decibels, 65, 70 decibels, whatever is comfortable for you. You could also take it a step further and use REW with a calibration microphone in case you want to have just that much more accurate readings when it comes to your sound pressure levels. One thing to note though is that I really like having this because any AVR, when you're running through Odyssey or Direct Live, etc., you also have the ability to do this and make any manual adjustments you need to. Because the AVR itself will generate pink noise and fire it out of, whatever specific speaker you want it to, so you can adjust the levels accordingly. But what's great about this is that it's coming from the source that I will eventually be watching from. I mean, sure, it's great that the AVR itself can generate pink noise, but I did notice when I was level matching, there was about a 1 or 2 decibel difference between what the AVR was outputting versus what my 4K Blu-ray player was outputting. So it kind of gave me a little bit more peace of mind knowing that I was actually playing pink noise from a disc rather than just the AVR, because I will be watching from a disc whenever I feel like watching a movie, because I love physical media and I would rather watch physical media. So it actually was pretty cool that I could level match according to what my LG UBK90 4K Blu-ray player is outputting, rather than just what my IOTA AVX17 is outputting.
Center.
The polarity test is pretty cool because it makes sure that you have your speakers wired correctly. Maybe you accidentally flipped the red and the black, the positive and negative on accident when you were hooking it up. So what the polarity test does is it plays pink noise out of 2 different speakers, front left, center, front left, front right, for example, and so on. And obviously on the screen, it shows you in phase and out of phase. In phase should sound direct, and it should have low frequencies present. Because as soon as it flipped to out of phase, then it didn't sound as direct. It didn't sound like it was coming directly from where it should be coming from. It sounded more just kind of all over the place, like an omnidirectional sound, right? That says that it is out of phase. So when it says it's in phase and it sounds direct and you can feel some low frequencies coming out of that pink noise, you're good. But if it's out of phase, and that's when it sounds more direct and the low frequencies are present, oops, that means they are in fact out of phase and you probably need to double check the wiring on your speakers. Does that make sense? In phase, direct, out of phase, kind of wide, Like for example, when it did the front left and front right, out of phase sounded like it was coming from the surrounds all of a sudden. So it's just another step to make sure your speakers are properly wired. Timing test is actually really cool. It's actually a test to position your speakers correctly. I mean, sure, that's honestly what the timing aspect is doing with Odyssey or Direct Live. It's no matter where your speakers are, it's going to set a particular however many millisecond delay on each speaker so that it will arrive at your main listening position at the same time. But this way, with the timing tests, with this calibration disc, you can actually physically move your speakers, if possible. You can physically move your speakers to where they need to be in order for those sounds to arrive at your listening position at the same time. So this test probably isn't for everyone, considering that a lot of people just don't have enough space, probably. Like for example, you can see my surround backs right now. My surround backs were closer to my listening position before I did the timing test. But when I did the timing test, for example, of the front left with the surround back left, what happened was I was pretty much hearing the surround back left and that was it. I wasn't really hearing anything from the front, or at least that's what my brain was perceiving. So I moved the surround back left backwards, more, until it sounded like that sound was kind of coming from the side. A phantom center between the front left and the surround back left. To me, this is really cool. It kind of made me geek out because I love doing things by ear. That's honestly how I learned how to play piano, as I just play by ear. I don't actually read sheet music. So to be able to apply that same concept to my own home theater, that was really cool. I was really excited about that. My only complaint about this particular part of the disc is that it's all stemmed from the left front speaker. So it's always going to be compared to the left front speaker. Left front and front wide right. Left front, surround back right. You still can get a sense of where the speakers should be placed if you can hear the sounds as if they were kind of like in your head. You know, front left compared to rear height right. If you can hear the rear height right more, then you probably got to move your height back a little bit, just so that when those two sounds are being played out of those two speakers simultaneously, it should sound like it's kind of floating above you, around your head. That's when you know you've got the physical distance dialed in, right? Which honestly, when I played that back, speaking of the front left and rear height right, it made me want to adjust my heights. Right now, they're just kind of shooting downward. They're not angled towards my listening position. So really, the direct sound is kind of to my right with the height speakers. So this made me want to maybe put some sort of rig up there, or maybe I'll put like an angled piece of drywall up there so that I can now have the heights kind of pointing more in my direction and not just kind of pointing down at the ground. I mean, I still get Atmos effects, and that's honestly better for if you have a lot, you know, maybe a couple rows of seats, or if you have a big long couch. Having them point down towards the floor is probably better, just so that everyone can get some height effects. But in my case, since this is my testing theater and it's just me in the very center of the center, now I want to do something about that. I want to pinpoint those height speakers pointing directly at me, just like my surround backs do, just like my surrounds, you know, everything else, all my ear level speakers are pointing directly at me, right? So anyway, I just really geeked out with doing this because it made me want to fix some things. And with Odyssey and Dirac Live doing all these things automatically, never before had I realized that I wanted to physically move my speakers in such a way where I wanted them more accurately firing the audio directly to me. So yeah, if there was a way to choose which speakers were going to be playing this sound, or I guess if there were more options, like say both rear surrounds, or both rear heights, or front height right and surround left. I totally get it though, because if any of you have taken statistics in college, you know that there are so many possibilities, especially with my setup being, you know, 9 ear level speakers and 4 height speakers. So the amount of different possibilities and combinations of speakers is so much. So I totally get it that everything is, you know, tied to the front left. But if there were a way to somehow have some sort of matrix where I can select which speaker pair I wanted to have these sounds coming out of, awesome. But I understand that would have been really hard to pull off.
1, 2.
Crossover points are dope because it actually lets you know just how low your speakers can go before they are silent. But before you even start this particular part of the disc, make sure your subwoofers are off. Maybe that's something they'll tweak for maybe version 2 of this disc, but whenever I did the crossover points, it activated my subwoofers. So when I was listening to my front left, I thought, oh my gosh, that can get down low. Lo and behold, it was activating the LFE channel as well. So my subwoofers were going, and obviously those can get very low. So I turned off my subwoofers. Okay, now I can actually hear what the actual speaker can do. Because on paper, of course, it's going to say that they can handle, I don't know, something down to 45 hertz or 60 hertz, 32 hertz, whatever. This is a test to see if that is actually true. And then once you know how low your speakers can go, then you can go back in and set your crossover frequencies accordingly in your AVR. Because the usual rule of thumb is the lowest that your speakers can handle, say 50 hertz, for example, you set the crossover 10 to 20 hertz higher than that. So if you notice that it's rated to handle 45 hertz, but when it got down to 45 hertz, it was barely coming out at all. It was really quiet. So it's more like 60 hertz that speaker can handle. Then you probably want to set the crossover to the THX recommended 80 hertz. So 60, 80, plus 20 hertz. Make sense? Again, this is something you could do in REW as well. But again, it doesn't support height channels. So I really appreciate that this disc supports configurations up to 9.1.6. That's huge. Speaker pairs are cool. They're kind of like the timing test, but it's pink noise instead of that little boop, 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 little direct, little kind of bouncing ball kind of sound. This is pink noise coming out of particular speaker pairs like front left, front right, surround left, surround right. So it's another way to make sure that your speakers are spaced evenly and correctly according to your listening position. Because when you play pink noise out of your front left and front right, it should sound like that noise is coming from the center. It's basically creating that phantom center. So if you're sitting in your listening position and the pink noise sounds like it's kind of coming from the left a little bit, then that means you probably need to move your left speaker out a little bit more, or maybe bring your right speaker in a little bit more. So it's just another way to make sure your speakers are physically positioned correctly. Tonal balance is kind of like taking the speaker pairs portion of the disc and just amping it up a little bit, because you're dealing with even more speakers all at once. 5.1, 7 ear level speakers, or even in my case, 9.1.4, just all of them going all at once, making sure that it sounds balanced, that not one side is louder than the other or overpowering one part of the room more than the other, that kind of thing. Object panning is really cool because it's pink noise that is traveling around your room. You've got pink noise moving around your room in a square, a diamond shaped move, 50% height square and diamond to make sure your ear level speakers are working properly with your height speakers simultaneously, and also a square and diamond move in the heights only. That's what the 100% height means. So when you follow that little yellow ball and wherever it's going sounds like it is in that position, then you're good. But when it's traveling and it sounds a bit off, like if it's supposed to be directly to your side and it sounds like it's a little bit more forward or a little bit more back, then you've got to, again, maybe make some adjustments if you can. Oh boy, the torture test is fun. It really tests out your system to see if it's calibrated, if you've got your speakers in the right position, because it goes all over, crazy diagonals, crazy horizontal X's up and over. Not only pink noise, but also Chana's voice moving around the room. I honestly like hearing Chana's voice better because it's a little bit more direct. Because with pink noise, it's kind of omnipresent. It's not as directional. So hearing Chana's voice is just a little bit more precise as far as channel separation and where those sounds need to be at any given time. But it is torture. He named that category correctly.
Here I am, moving around your room. Here I am, just moving around your room. Can you hear me? Moving through your room. moving through the room, moving through the room. I'm moving around your room.
Okay, the next three categories are more kind of utility categories. You can also do this kind of thing in REW, but again, like I said, I enjoy doing it from the disk, knowing that I will be watching my content from the same source. So impulse response is just one quick sweep from 20 Hertz to 20 kilohertz. If you're wanting to, say, use REW in conjunction with this, so once it does the impulse response, and maybe you've captured it in REW, then you can see how your room is handling those impulse responses. If there's a huge dip in a certain frequency, or even a boost in a certain frequency, because of how your room is responding to those impulse responses. So like I said, it's more of a utility feature. So again, this just takes it up a notch. The sweep test is basically the same thing, but it's several impulse responses over and over. So maybe while it's doing it, you can tweak some things or move some things around. And periodic pink noise as well is just a way to get pink noise out of a specific speaker, so you can run some tests if you so choose. As opposed to REW doing its own pink noise generator or your AVR doing its own pink noise generator. This is just another way to have those more utility features available somewhere else besides your AVR or REW. So like I said at the beginning, I put my IOTA AVX17 back to factory default. I wanted to start from square one. And with doing that, I not only was able to manually adjust all those different things that would happen during the auto room correction portion. So I'm utilizing basically the same tools that automatically happen during the calibration step that the Preamp does itself, but that way I get to go in and adjust them manually and do them one by one. I actually measured the distances with a measuring tape from my speakers to my listening position, so then I could manually input those distances into the Preamp. So I just wanted to see what complete manual control sounded like, because a lot of times, and I mean, you're probably just like me, you probably rely on that auto room correction to some degree, whether that be Odyssey or Direct Live or whatever. But every time I do it, I have to go back in and manually adjust some parameters anyway. So I just wanted to start from scratch, put in all those measurements, put in all the little details and numbers one by one manually. And then I watched my go-to ATMOS tracks, like the beginning of Mad Max Fury Road. There's all those little voices that are all over the soundstage. I watched the racing scene from Ready Player One. I watched Godzilla vs. Kong, the first major battle scene from Hacksaw Ridge, and even A Quiet Place to see how my system was calibrated to even very subtle effects. And I gotta tell you, it sounded phenomenal. Dare I say better than when I used auto room correction? To a degree, yes. I mean, sure, it wasn't as if this was a brand new home theater system, but especially with the height channels. Like I said, I didn't even move the height channels. The only actual physical movement that I did when I was doing the timing tests was I moved my surround backs. But maybe just doing that, maybe opening up the surround backs also gave my heights a better chance to throw audio at me that was more noticeable. I don't know. I don't know why it happened, but I could just hear a little bit more detail, just this edge over what I had previously heard before. I didn't bump up the height channels more than the ear level speakers. Everything was level matched to the same decibel level, but it just seemed like subtle elements above me and surrounding me were a little bit more noticeable. And let's be honest, even when I do the auto room correction, I don't know what's going. This may be a quirk of the IOTA AVX17, but it blasts the test tones out of the subwoofers way too hard. I don't know why. So every time I run auto calibration, I have to go back in and put the subwoofers back to a normal level because it always turns them way down. So this way, starting with the Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit, I definitely was able to dial in my subwoofers a little bit more precise than I had before because I was starting from scratch. I didn't have to go back and adjust things. I automatically started to adjust things right off the bat. So after I had calibrated everything manually, I then went back and ran auto room correction again, because in all honesty, it was mainly for the timing aspect, because it does little chirps that are calibrated with the little calibration microphone it comes with. I mean, using a tape measure is decent, but it's not going to be like exact. So that is one advantage of running auto room correction, is that the distances between the little calibration microphone and where the actual speakers are is going to be a lot more precise. But again, you can even use a Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit with REW, because REW is obviously going to be a lot more precise when it comes to timing. But it is interesting that I honestly enjoyed the manual calibration that I did more so than what my IOTA AVX17 was able to do automatically. Although truth be told, I am still trying to figure out if there is a way to marry the two, where I use the Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit and my IOTA AVX17's auto calibration to just gel together. And I guess I did do that when I was able to actually try and move my speakers around, or maybe tilt them, or just fine tune the position of the speakers. But I would probably say, at least for me personally in this particular room, the perfect tag team duo to take it even to the next level would be run the Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit with REW and a UMIC 1 calibration microphone. So that's probably going to be the next step, besides trying to angle my height speakers more towards my listening position. But I got to tell you, this is an incredible tool. It's basically taking the same exact tools that would be happening during auto room correction, but giving you the power to do them manually. Because I think we've all been there in that situation where we're like, okay, well, I guess I'm just handing it over to my own AVR to do all the calibration for me. Fingers crossed it does everything correctly. And for the most part, it does. But the fact that I always have to make manual adjustments anyway, why not just do it all manually from start to finish? But I was thinking about it, and you know what is revolutionary about this calibration toolkit? Since you can do it manually, whether that be if you download the files or actually get the Blu-ray disc shipped to you, you can apply this to a soundbar system. I know, right? I mean, yes, your flagship soundbars from Sony, Samsung, Sonos, all the companies that start with S apparently, they will have their own version of fine-tuning and calibrating your room to sound good, which is fine. You can do that if you want, sure. But you can also apply this to soundbars that don't come with any kind of room correction. If you have a soundbar below your TV and it has upward firing ATMOS speakers, or especially if you have surround speakers on your soundbar, and if those surround speakers have upward firing ATMOS speakers, this is a way for you to calibrate your soundbar system in a way you hadn't been able to before. Because now you can have pink noise or frequency sweeps or that little ping pong timing sound coming directly out of specific channels from your soundbar and your surrounds connected to your soundbar wirelessly. Because I'll tell you right now, I am definitely going to use this Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit when I get the Nakamichi Dragon, because I want to make sure that it is calibrated to the T. Yes, I do remember when I was there at CES getting the demo of the Nakamichi Dragon that it will have its own room correction software to some degree. But again, this Spatial Audio Calibration disc is just going to elevate that ability to be able to manually fine-tune things. So I'm just stoked that I can take advantage of this toolkit. Just as long as I have a Blu-ray player to put it in, I'm golden. So in summary, yeah, I do highly recommend this calibration toolkit for your own system, especially if you want to take the power back and just be able to do these calibration steps on your own. If you're nerdy like I am and want to make sure that you have control over all of these things and that you yourself can make these adjustments, moving your speakers, moving your couch or your chair, pointing your ATMOS speakers more towards your listening position. It's given me the ability to calibrate my home theater system to how my ears want it, which is what I prefer. I trust my ears, and the Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit allows me to do that. Thank you for joining me on this overview of the Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit. Again, thanks to Joe and Tel and TechnoDad for A, putting all the hard work into this, and B, sending out a copy so I could test it out for myself. It's the real deal, man. It's everything I expected and more. And like I said, even if you have a soundbar, man, this calibration toolkit will be able to help you dial it in way more than you ever thought you could before. Pretty wild, man. So I truly appreciate how this kind of levels the playing field and brings us all together as one happy home theater family, whether you have a soundbar or a traditional system. Now we can all calibrate to our heart's content. So if you want to pick up the calibration disc or you want to download the files, go to spatialcd.com and enter my code EALAN10, EALAN10 for 10% off. Because trust me, you're going to want to have this in your arsenal to really make your home theater system sound like you want it to sound. Again, not as an alternative to auto room correction, but as a gelling of all these things combined. Put the power back in your own hands. Am I right? As always, please be kind to each other out there. Don't just watch TV and movies, experience the level of detail you'll get after doing the Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit. And of course, always be listening.